So let's change the belts on the transport for the Fostex 260. By the way, I was kind of wondering when I opened this whether this was going to be largely similar to the 160 transport, and it's not. It's a significantly different design. Got a dual motor system in this one. The 160 had a single motor, and different belts coming from the same motor were also powering the reel mechanism. This one, the reel mechanism has a motor of its own. Reel mechanism means this bit that sits between the supply reel and the take-up reel. Depending on the mode, then this set of cogs is going to interact with these reels, so it's going to be turning this one this way in playback and fast forward mode, but this one this way in rewind mode. The pull of the tape at a steady speed across the playback and record head, this one, and the erase head, that one, is controlled by the pinch roller raising as part of this. It doesn't want to move too much in this one, it hasn't got much play without it being active, but basically this whole section raises and lowers the pinch roller. I need to fix the spring on that, but that would tend to raise in lockstep, so the tape would clamp between this capstan, this metal pin here, and the pinch roller, so the pinch roller would end up turning that way, the capstan's rotating that way, and it's bringing the tape through here, and then the reel motor turning this would pull the tape taut. The raising and lowering of that appears to be driven by teeth at the bottom of this flywheel. The flywheel's on the opposite side of the capstan, and that's interacting with some gears here, so depending on the input that it's getting from these data cables from the shuttle controls, that's going to change whether this is engaged with the reels and in which direction, and whether this is raised or lowered, and the combination of that gives us the different modes: fast forward, rewind, playback. So because we've got a separate motor for the reel system and a series of gears and so on in here for the raising and lowering of the head, we've only got one belt which will run from the pulley at the top of this capstan motor to the flywheel. I haven't tested this yet, but it looks like 2 screws here need to be removed in order to access that flywheel. Just take these off. Presumably I'm going to edit this in post-production, making this sequence seem shorter than it is. So you can see there's some very aged tape holding these ribbon cables up against this plate. Maybe replace that with some newer form of tape. Okay, so it looks like we've got a sort of slotting mechanism, so this needs to slide forward like that, and then it will come up. Presumably that's it's the same on this side as well. So you would take that off and put a replacement belt here. We'll need to figure out in a minute what size that's likely to be. So when I'm saying the data cable sends information to the gears, I mean basically it's raising and lowering this gear arm. And so, there's a feedback switch from these little leaf switches in here, which are going to be closed under certain circumstances. I'm being a little bit vague about it. I mean, these things do tend to be quite complex. And from a repair point of view, really what I tend to be doing is seeing, is everything lubricated? Are all the springs that should be present, are they present? Is anything broken or any missing clips? That kind of thing. You don't really need to get down to the level of having the same knowledge of the system as the electrical designer usually. So I didn't say earlier, but it's these little tiny narrow ferrule screws that are used to attach this plate. Looking at a couple of belt sizes that I've got in stock, this has got approximately 138mm folded length, and you can see that that is very loose. So that's the size that I would use for like 244. Here's one that's about 120 in folded length, which is what I would use in a 424 Mark III. And you can see it's a bit short. I mean, it will stretch over the pulley there. Whether that would be okay or not, I can't really say. It might stress the motor out slightly. So I would say a bit longer than that. So if that's 120, I reckon somewhere in the region of 130mm folded length, flat section, neoprene belt, 3 to 4mm in width is going to be what goes on there. So that's more or less the same belt size that I keep in stock for a Porter 1. I just don't have any in at the moment. I'll need to order one before I fit this again. Right, looking over at this pinch roller, that's really the only other rubber part you would need to change. So there's a clip here, so we just find the split, lift that off with tweezers, or at least that's how I do it. That's going to lift off, so let's see if we can figure out where this spring is meant to go. Remember, this came off earlier. Basically slot this hole onto this peg that's pointing out of the rear side. The shorter arm fits into that recess in the top, and then the longer arm goes over a crook like that. Then when you place this post back on, you see that longer arm slots into a place here, meaning that that springs back into place. We can then take our retainer clip and push that over. You could probably get away with a E-clip of the correct size. You get little components boxes with the selection of E-clips. That would cover you if you ever lost that. If I just take that off again, the pinch roller that's in it is the type we've seen in some other Fostex units, Porta 1, Porta 2, so a lot of like late 80s Porta Studios used that generic part. So we can just have a fiddle about with this central pin. If you push it back and forth enough, so you're going to be able to push it in from the back enough that you're going to be able to grab that forward part, pull that out, and so you'd be able to replace that. But actually that's in sufficiently good condition. I'm just going to leave it in. Push that pin back in from the front, click it with the pliers, make sure that spring's still in the right place. Slot it on, press my retainer clip back into place. So I won't bother to wait to film the placement of the correct size of belt. You can assume that I have gone away, ordered a sort of 130mm belt or thereabouts, and fitted that, and that's all working again. So we won't come back to this transport again unless I have some other sort of electrical or mechanical problem with it later on.